ready to start. I'm just going to see, Suzanne, I'm going to have you on WhatsApp in case you can tell me like how the quality is, if there's a problem with the video or
Okay.
something. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because because this week's lesson is about Native American reservations, which I'm kind of going to, I always flip around the, the themes of our lessons as I get to actually preparing them. I decide I want to concentrate on something different. So we're still doing Native American reservations, but really, I want to talk about Native American Heritage Month and Day because today is Thanksgiving, okay, which is our, the day with the big turkey and with where the Americans get together and then they are with their families all day. Then they eat a lot, they watch football, and then the next day they go shopping. That's basically what it looks like. It's really our only ponte of the year. It's our long weekend of the year. For many people, you decide to go home. We all live in different states than our families usually. So you'll decide to go home either Thanksgiving or Christmas, not normally both because it's expensive. And so my family, they're all in different places. I've got a brother who's in Las Vegas visiting. He's actually hiking in Las Vegas. Most people go there to gamble, to go to the
Yeah.
casinos. My brother went hiking there because there's great nature there, actually.
Yeah.
I've got another sister. She's in Knoxville, Tennessee, visiting her daughter at the university. I've got another sister I haven't heard from yet. I have no idea where she is. My mom's at home. So it's just interesting to see where everybody is. I'm not celebrating today, but I will celebrate on Sunday, maybe with Suzanne if she'll be there. You right?
Yeah.
Are you coming?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I'm coming.
we planned every year we have a Thanksgiving dinner, but this year we're having a lunch and we're not cooking it this year. We're actually eating out. So we're going to see how that goes, but there will be music. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So we changed the date. We make Thanksgiving when we want. But for today's lesson, I thought that we could talk about the sort of other side of Thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving that I love is the part where we're with our families, where we're celebrating together. There's no presents, it's just about food and family. So I love this holiday. But there's also the ugly side, of course, which is, the Thanksgiving is sort of almost like marks sort of the beginning of like the end of the Native American culture in America. Not it's not the end, I don't want to say that, but it's the beginning of a genocide, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about Thanksgiving, it's hard to do it in a way without talking about the ugly part of it. And so the US government now recognizes the day after Thanksgiving. So tomorrow, Black Friday, okay, this is what Black Friday is, by the way. It's the day after Thanksgiving because people are off of work and they're tired of their families. They go shopping. Um, but tomorrow is the Native American Heritage Day, which has now become the month of November.
Mm-hmm.
Which is much better than one day because everybody talks about Thanksgiving, then have one the day after be. It's almost like an afterthought. It's a little bit even was considered kind of insulting, that the
Mm-hmm.
day after the biggest holiday of the year would be a day that people would recognize Native Americans. So anyway, so I'm thinking about that today. I'm thinking also about um, what's happening in Native American culture today, which I'm learning about because I don't have anybody in my family who is Native American. I've read a few books. I'm definitely no expert, but what I'm kind of like I do in all my lessons, I kind of bring you on like where I'm going with my research on the subject. I have to say, I learned a lot of really interesting things. Preparing this lesson and things that I think I really want to look more into. So it was an interesting thing. So the different directions I'm thinking about are actually like why reservations exist, how did they start, what was the relationship between the Native Americans and the American government. That's one part. Then I'm thinking a lot about the Trail of Tears. If you've heard about that, the Trail of Tears, okay, would be when Native Americans were forcibly removed from their land in the southern United States and forced to go mostly towards out west in the United States to their land was taken away. They were given terrible land and forced to live in these reservations, which many still exist. And the conditions are still not, or definitely subpar. They're not in line with what they should be according to the treaties that were created with the American government. So everything about this, the history of the Native American population is sad. It's horrible because it's like every step of the way they were completely betrayed by everybody who tried to make an agreement with them. They were often treated as children, as they were tricked. Treaties were never fully respected. So and the Native American population still pays the price for that now because there's poverty. There are parts of America, we think of America as this first world country, but there are places where there's not running water. We talked about this maybe last year with the Appalachian area where there's still, areas where there's no running water, but there's also reservations where there are generations of people who've never had running water in their house. Okay. So we're talking about extreme poverty in some cases. Of course, there are, 320 something recognized tribes in America. There are many reservations. Some are more wealthy because of when gaming and gambling became legal because in those areas because there's sovereign Native American laws, tribal laws, which are different than the American laws, et cetera. So there are some, success stories. There's also a lot of sadness. So I'm sort of thinking about those things. I'm also thinking about what young Native Americans are doing now to protect their identity. I'm thinking a lot about, there's a particular chef who I'm obsessed with, who is from the Sioux tribe, and he is called the Sioux Chef, Sioux, who we've talked about before, who's bringing Native American indigenous foods into the American culinary discourse, and as a way also of combating, sort of, he's trying to decolonize, or that's what he calls decolonizing food on the reservations, but also off the reservations, and bringing visibility to people who are often kind of overlooked. So that's interesting to me. And then another part I'm looking at is I'm looking at identity in terms of hair. I love thinking about the politics of hair. And so I found a couple things I want to share with you. So basically, I would like to start by showing you a video. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
All right. So it's about 10 minutes. I'm going to put it's a long one, but there's a lot there. And I think it explains really, really in a clear, interesting way. I put the subtitles on. The subtitles are automatically generated, so sometimes they're kind of wrong, but just use them just to help you in general. But they're not, trust your ear more than your eyes, let's say. Okay. So this first video is going to give us, I think it's also good to get the story from Native Americans themselves. So that's why I want to share this video with you. I thought it was really informative. I watched it twice already and I thought it was so good. I thought we could just directly watch it together. So let me just first, let me find it. Oops, share. Oh, wait, this is our lesson, but I don't think I want to. Wait, if I do like this, can you see my screen? Does it look like a YouTube video?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I did do it. Now, I wonder though if I've shared the sound. I probably haven't. So I'm going to unshare again, because you have to think about these things, whether people can hear them or not, right? So if I share my screen and I go like this, says, share sound. There you go. So when I do this, you probably can't hear me as well. So, okay. Okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make it big.
Did you know that the USA was not the first democracy?
Okay. It's really fast though. So he's kind of slows down, but can you hear was the sound okay?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if you want on YouTube, you can you modify the speed if you want on YouTube.
I know. I think
There's
I'm gonna
way
let it
back.
go fast. I know. You can watch it at home at 75%. I'm gonna leave it fast for you just so that we get through it in the time that we have. But just so you know, if you don't understand every word, it's okay. It's normal. But you'll get most of it anyway. Okay, here we go.
Democracy in North America? It's us. I mean, the Mohawks and 4 other tribes that created the Great Law of Peace. This democracy was formed by the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. We called ourselves the Haudenosaunee, which translates to the people of the Longhouse. But of course, the French would call us the Iroquois Confederacy. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy still exists today, with the inclusion of more tribes. But our impact is nearly missing from history books. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, even Frederick Engels and Karl Marx were influenced by the structure of government. I mean, the Great Law of Peace outlines a federal government, which has authority over the member tribes, a legislature, executive branch, veto power, and freedoms of speech, press, and religion. So if the USA took our blueprint of democracy and our theory on interstate peacemaking, then how the heck did we end up on reservations? This is a people's history of Native America with me, Tyler Clare. Before we answer the reservation question, we need to backtrack to the US Constitution. Why? Because treaties, that's why. I'll explain. Indian appears 3 times in the Constitution. The first is to imply that Indians are not citizens, then again later in the 14th Amendment. But the third mention is to declare that Congress has the power to regulate commerce with Indian tribes, thereby acknowledging the sovereignty Indians have to govern themselves. But what does this mean? Well, it's interpreted by many to mean that Indian tribes are sovereign nations. Therefore, only through treaties can the United States negotiate with tribes. That negotiation requires approval by Congress, but any such agreement can be questioned, and in that case, goes to the Supreme Court. Confused? Well, join the club. But here's what you need to know. The federal government negotiated treaties with many Indian nations, at least up until 1871. But the Supreme Court's historical rulings with regard to treaties, the Constitution, and Indian law have determined 2 main things. 1, Congress has fairly broad power over Indian nations. And 2, the judicial branch also has power to push back on bad policies. Also, you probably noticed I use the term Indian. That's because Indian is a legal term for us, just as Indian country is a legal term for all of our land, but that excludes Alaska Native land. We're the only racial group that's also a political entity.
I hate that. Oh well. Sorry. Skip the.
The United States has had a nation-to-nation relationship with tribes for nearly 250 years, and during that time has acquired 1.5 billion acres of our land. Tribal nations are both confined to reservations on Indian country and legally dependent on the federal government. Various treaties outline an exchange of land for the promise of rights, as well as health, education, and social welfare in perpetuity. What happened? Were those treaties the worst deals of all time? Well, no. So why aren't these treaties honored? Treaties, despite being legally valid, had many issues when they were written. Primarily is that many treaties came after or under the threat of war. Because to be clear, tribes do not let white people in willingly. We have records of wars and battles starting in the 1600s going all the way until 1923. Let's take some time to scroll on screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Then came the translation. Translators, let alone accurate translators, were few and far between. What was meant and what was written were sometimes 2 separate things that were settled in court or on the battlefield. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of these treaties could be interpreted like this. If Indians signed a treaty, they can hunt, fish, and live as they want, but on an area reserved for them, or a reservation. In exchange, they would give up their current land base, ensuring the federal government would continue to take care of them since America capitalized off our resources. From 1778 to 1871, the federal government ratified over 370 treaties with tribal nations, and it's safe to say all have been broken. Now, let's take a look at today's reservations and some of the current statistics around reservations. You often see low income, high rates of incarceration, low access to clean drinking water, not to mention the actual location. far away from major public infrastructure or even cities, these are not the statistics of people who are taken care of. Indians signed those treaties in part to ensure the futures of their descendants. Since then, we've been fighting and litigating our way to get America to uphold these treaty promises and respect our cultures and lifeways. The first set of cases that validated our treaty promises is referred to as the Marshall Trilogy. Out of these cases came the doctrine of federal trust responsibility, meaning that since tribes have inherent sovereignty over their lands and governance, and if the federal government takes their land by treaty or otherwise, they must be compensated with essential services to Indian people as well as protection of Indian land and resources. This makes tribes domestic, dependent nations. Makes sense, right? Well, not to the other branches of government. The executive branch's War Department established the Office of Indian Affairs to install the policies of the Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny is the idea that European Americans were ordained to settle the entire continent, which paved a way for Congress to adopt other Indian removal practices. For example, the 1830 Indian Removal Act, which allowed the president to set aside land west of the Mississippi for the tribes living in the South to what's now known as Indian Territory. So these new rules led to the Trail of Tears, a genocidal death march that forced 60,000 tribal members off their land in the South and moved to modern-day Oklahoma. To help us understand, we'll bring in Jessica Imitachi, an Oklahoma-based Chickasaw tribal member. Her great-grandfather, M.V. Cheadle, was born in Indian Territory and served on the tribe's last original legislature from 1905 until statehood in 1907. Hi, Jessica.
Okay. Thank you for having me today.
Can you help me and the viewers understand these treaties?
We've got this promise into perpetuity that our people will be taken care of, not just for 7 generations, but for forever. And that includes education, that includes healthcare, that includes housing, that includes everything that it takes to make a person a healthy person. So then it becomes a question of, but how do we still hold the federal government to their word?
After the Indian Removal Act, Congress passed the Indian Appropriations Act. There were 4 versions of this act, all basically codifying the reservation system. In order for many tribal members to get their slice of land, they had to adopt a surname, LeClaire, more on that in a later episode, and were given a blood quantum or a native purity test. However, when non-natives purchased allotted land from Indians, they did not have to abide by tribal rules, nor were they subject to tribal courts. If you remember from our first episode, this was quite a problem for tribes to keep their citizens safe. That was a lot of information. And you might be thinking reservations are really bad, but we haven't explained why reservations are important to Native Americans. To help us answer, let's bring back Jessica.
I think if you ask a Native person what their reservation is or means to them, I think that you'll hear many different answers. It's ceremony, it's community, it's beauty and love, and sometimes it's trauma and pain. It's all of these things. And I think that is what makes reservation life so amazing. It's the tapestry of who we are.
So based on your work, how can Native Americans hold truth to power?
I think about the census and voting as almost having a marriage. You're counted, you're recognized, you're seen, you have a voice. So it is about power, it is about representation, power and governance, but it's also about money. It's what determines federal funding. Now we have the power to elect leaders that do believe in honoring treaties, that do say, yes, we're going to sit down and we're going to meet with you face to face and we're going to talk about what your needs are. We know as American Indian people, we can carry these things like health, education, housing, all these things out best for ourselves and for our people, but it's the federal government's responsibility and duty to provide the funding to do that. And so, that's part of what honoring that treaty means.
So when we think about some of the issues with the design of reservations, isolation, low funding, and a much understood distrust of, any governments, access to voting and the census is incredibly challenging. The states control rules of voting, but reservations are technically under federal jurisdiction and often depend on federal, not state resources. So voting drop boxes are few and far between in Indian country, sometimes hundreds of miles away. Voting places are the same, often requiring a full day off work, a car, or sometimes horseback to vote. So despite not being able to legally vote until 1924, or even 1958 in states like Utah, Indian country has very strong political organization, not only in the polls, but in the courts too. What would happen if the state and federal governments abided by these treaties as the supreme law of the land as cited in the Constitution? What would that look like? Fences preventing interstate migration of elk, deer, bison, and other barriers to hunting would be removed. Reservation schools, hospitals, and infrastructure would look like, well, look way better than they do right now. Take the Indian Health Services. A federal report found that an estimated $51 billion is needed to provide adequate care to all patients. And before you get sticker shock, the US budget pays nearly 10 times that amount in interest on loans. But our treaties do not mention deficit spending. They promise tribes health care, education, sovereignty, hunting, fishing, and culture for as long as the water flows and the grass grows. Thank you for watching.
Okay, were you able to hear that okay? Was it okay? Fast?
More or less.
More or less. Okay. What it does is it kind of just gives you a really fast, okay. I have, of course, the links for you as well, but I think what it does, it sort of gives you a little bit of a different look at what the reservations are for, the positive and the negative, and also how they got to, got this way. Okay. Suzanne, how did you feel about that? Were you able to get something?
Yeah, I could hear well. There's only a lot of like I could understand what he said, but there's a lot of information that maybe I need to process because it's a lot. But it's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. Especially the part about voting that the same thing about minorities in America, that it's always difficult to get access to vote. So yeah.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's shocking. Thank
Yeah.
you. Silvio, what about you? Were you able to understand something?
Yeah, I understood all. So,
Do you have any questions or any comments?
mm, no, not really.
Okay, good.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
some comments. Yeah, that basically I know that the American Indians, they are very religious and they believe in the animals and in the spirits. So they are spiritual. So I know just that. So
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because that comes up again and again, right? That everybody's connected, that everything is sacred, the animals, and we're cousins with nature, with animals. And so to have this history of people constantly betraying you is
yeah,
horrible.
they
In
are
fact,
connected with the weather too. Yeah.
right. And messages and the universe and things like that. It's interesting. There are other documentaries I was watching today with my students, who are of course at different age. They're high school, and we were watching teens talking about their experience. And um, in these reservations, they're often in the middle of nowhere, so there's nothing to do. There's huge problems with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and crime. There's because they don't have the services that they were promised, right? So,
Mhm.
um, so we could talk about the negative stuff all day. I'm sure it's you saw the images, so you saw like what it would look like if the treaties were actually if they were respected and the people there had their right to hunt, to fish, to live their ways, their culture, what it would look like. You saw a little bit about that. And also the healthcare and education. So one of the things that the trade-off was, okay, we'll give them our land, but they'll promise us for our children and their children. So I think the people are doing their best, just saying, okay, let's see what, since we can't really live the way we wanted to, we better make sure that our children are taken care of. But in the end, that was never really respected, right? So
Mhm.
on the reservations now, it's interesting, all the programs also for young people, helping them cope with also generational PTSD, right? Post traumatic stress syndrome. There's a lot of the high suicide rate also on a lot of
Mhm.
these reservations. And now, we talked about the poverty as well. So if you live off reservation, you're almost automatically going to make two times what, or, twice what you would make if you lived on the reservation as far as money. So many people move to the cities. But the problem with moving to the city then is you don't have the culture, right? So now you've got people kind of torn in two directions. Do we leave for better opportunities for our families? Do we stay because then we don't lose our culture? So those are the things that are coming up. So there are a lot of associations that are on these on the reservations, trying to, give opportunities to people who are not living on the reservations, but maybe are from Native American families to go there and also have, learn some of the traditions, learn the language. That's a big thing too, is trying to preserve the languages. And over the last 50 years, people have been working on writing the languages because it was illegal to speak the languages from, I think, 1890 to 1990. I mean, there's like 100 years where people were not allowed to speak their languages. It's insane to think about, especially in a country where there's no official language. America does not have an official language. So the idea that you would ban people from speaking their language, but it was part of like trying to get people to integrate, which is never, or assimilate really, which is never a great idea. So there's also the other thing I was thinking about today was I was thinking about the Trail of Tears. So I'm going to just bring you through the little lesson I created here because I've got a couple images for you if I can find it. Oops, not this guy. Got rid of him. We already saw him. I'm just going to go to our lesson. So got him. Actually, we can kind of read about the Trail of Tears. Let's do that so we can get some information here. Bruna, can you read this? Can you read the first sentence?
Only partially, because because there is too big, but part of the text of the is
Cut off, covered.
covered. Okay, from your from
Photo?
your picture. I don't know, Susan, Caroline, and it.
Okay, if
Problem.
you put the mouse on that and you reduce it, you see you can go to the, how can you explain that, Suzanne? If you go up there, you can actually reduce that, make it disappear.
The video.
Huh?
I could, okay, so it's better. Could you make the text smaller? No, because yeah, okay,
Better?
and it's perfect.
Okay,
No?
go read for me
So may I?
at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, no, because I have now the text in the middle. Otherwise, it was partially on the left,
Covered.
and I couldn't read. Now it's
Okay.
perfect for me.
Perfect. Okay, read to me at the beginning.
At the beginning
Can
of
you?
no, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yes, perfect.
At the beginning of the 1830s, nearly 125,000 Native Americans lived on millions of acres of land in Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina, and Florida land. Their ancestors had occupied and cultivated for generations.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to stop you there and I'm going to have Silvio read the next sentence. Can you see it, Silvio? Can you see that or are you on your phone?
Yeah, I'm using my cell phone. Working on behalf of white settlers who wanted to grow cotton on the Indians' land.
Wait. No, the sentence before that starts, but by the end of the decade. Do you see that?
But by the end of the decade, very few natives remain anywhere in the southern eastern United States.
Thank you. Okay, Suzanne, can you continue?
Yeah, working on behalf of white settlers who wanted to grow cotton on the Indians' land, the federal government forced them to leave their homelands and walk hundreds of miles to a specially designed Indian territory across the Mississippi River. This difficult and oftentimes deadly journey is known as the Trail of Tears.
Okay, thank you, all three of you. So this is he talked about this Trail of Tears, right? So the people at the land was over here, and these are still cotton growing areas. And they forced the people to go from these different areas, but they finished mostly in Oklahoma. Okay, so Oklahoma has a large population, native population, and it's very much a part of, especially like the Cherokee Nation. A big part of their identity is the fact that they had to move from their original lands so that white settlers could farm there. Okay, so I thought that since we're reading, we could do a little more reading, do some quotes here. So I just found some so that we could concentrate on the more positive bits about Native American culture here. So how about this? Silvio, can you read this one? When you are in doubt.
When you are in doubt, we still are and wait. When doubt no longer exists for you, then go forward with courage. So long as mist envelop you, but still be still. Until the sunlight pours through and dispels the mist, as it surely will. Then act with courage. Chief White Eagle Anka.
Thank you. Bruna, can you read the next one? Humankind.
Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do, the web we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. Chief Sickle, Duwamish.
Thank you. That's such a great metaphor, the spider web, right? That what happens to, over here there's an action and a consequence. I love that. So interesting.
Yeah.
Suzanne, yeah.
I don't think the measure of a civilization is how tall its buildings of concrete are, but rather how well its people have learned to relate to their environment and fellow man. Sun Bear, Chihuahua.
Chippewa. That's from my area. Chippewa. Yeah. Thank you. Good. Bruna.
If you talk to the animals, they will talk with you and you will know each other. If you don't talk to them, you will not know them and what you do and what you do not know. You will fear. What one fears, one destroys. Cheer, George, so we will nation.
Isn't that a great one too?
Yeah.
You don't, okay? Yeah, what you do not know you will fear. What one fears, one destroys. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, an interesting comparison came up when we talk about the 1830 Indian Removal Act, which was the act that started the Trail of Tears, right? It was under President Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson, is the favorite president of President Trump. Isn't that ironic? He was a crazy one, but he was the one who absolutely wanted to get rid of Native people. Very sad. Okay. Whose turn is it? Silvio, maybe. Silvio.
Can
you read, Silvio? We must protect.
Yeah, we must protect the forest for our children, grandchildren, and children yet to be born. We must protect the forest for those who can't speak for themselves, such as birds, animals, fish, and trees.
They are so wise.
Yeah.
I know. Isn't it amazing? I love these. Is it Suzanne now?
Yeah.
I'm not taking it. Yeah, Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah. I have seen that in any great undertaking, it is not enough for a man to depend simply upon himself. Yeah.
And it's funny, his name is Lone Man, right?
Yeah.
But being alone doesn't work, right? I love that. Bruna.
I have heard you intend to settle us on a reservation near the mountains. I don't want to settle. I love to roam over the prairies. There I feel free and happy, but when we settle down, we grow pale and die. Chief 70
Thank you. Yeah. Silvio?
The Great Spirit is in all things, and he is in the air we breathe. The Great Spirit is our Father, but the earth is our mother. She nourishes us. That which we put into the ground, she returns to us.
Thank you. Big Thunder Wabanaki Algonquin. Nice. Okay. Suzanne.
Yeah, honor the sacred, honor the earth, our mother, honor the elders, honor all with whom we share the earth. Four legends, two
Four-leggeds,
legends,
yeah. Leggeds.
leggings.
Like four-legged
What
like
does it
animals,
mean?
right?
Oh,
To have
okay.
four
Yeah,
legs.
sure.
Four-leggeds, yeah, we don't normally
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't normally see it this way. Four-leggeds, two-leggeds, winged ones.
yeah.
Okay.
Winged ones, swimmers, crawlers, plant and rock people, walking balance and beauty, Native
Isn't that
American
great?
elder.
I
Yeah.
love that. Bruna.
Friend, do it as way that is. Whatever you do in life, do the very best you can with both your heart and minds. And if you do it that way, the power of the universe will come to your assistance if your heart and mind are in unity. When one sits in the hoop of the people, one must be responsible because all of creation is related. And the
It
heart
is. Yeah.
is and the heart of one is the heart of all, and the honor of one is the honor of all, and whatever we do affects everything in the universe. If you do it that way it is, if you truly join your heart and mind as one, whatever you ask for, that's the way it's going to be. Lakota
Nice.
instruction.
Hearth.
Instructions for living passed down from white buffalo calf women. Isn't that great? So I think we've got one more here. Is it Silvio?
Okay. So if the white man wants to live in peace with the Indian, he can live in peace. Treat all men alike. Give them all the same law. Give them all an even chance to live and grow. All men were made by the same great spirit chief. They are all brothers. The earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it. White
These
elk.
beautiful quotes.
Yeah.
Love these
Yeah.
quotes. You know, there are a few more, of course, too. But I love also the photos, these sort of old photos, and the names. I yes, Bruna. Did you say
Uh,
something?
yeah. What is life? It is the flesh.
Oh, you're reading? Sorry, I interrupted the share. No, I thought you had a question. That's why I
Sorry.
interrupted. So the other quotes, I'm gonna give them to you. I'll share them with you with the lesson, okay?
Thank
But I
you.
want to, I've got the last thing I want to show you is just that 3-minute video. I think it's 3 minutes about hair. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because the reason it came up is because I was reading about one of the problems in talking about American Indians now or talking about Native Americans is that people have an idea of what they used to be like, right? And they'll say, oh, they're not around anymore, right? Whereas Native people will be like, wait a minute, what am I? I'm still here. And so there's the problem of being invisible, right? So if a Native person is living in a big city, they can be mistaken for any other, for many other types of ethnicities. And so there is this sort of idea, this sort of stereotyped idea of Native Americans, and yet there are a lot of people. The largest, which is still small, but the largest, I think the largest reservation is 300,000 people, or is it or no, members? I think the Navajo Nation has like 300,000 members or something. So it's not huge numbers, but those are people who still exist. They're a minority who should be recognized. And so now there's also a movement with hair, and hair is always problematic in America, right? But hair is now protected. So hair is protected. You can't discriminate against someone if they're wearing their hair in something that reflects their ethnic heritage. So there is a movement also. This is true for African Americans. We see this, and with Native Americans. So there's this little video about this that I found pretty interesting. So I thought I would share that with you. Let me see what happens.
In different ways and with different descriptions, a lot of Native people will talk about hair as a source of spiritual strength. It's something that is an intimate part of being. But also, with hair, it's a way of saying, I am proud of and connected to and recognizable to my ancestors. And so it's just an identity affirmation. For some tribes, there's even a taboo about having someone who is not family braid your hair or things like that. Leonard Boos, who's one of our elders from Mille Lacs, he just passed away recently. He said when they were kids, if someone had a haircut, like I had a braid chopped off, they'd take the braid and they'd run it across a hot rock, and it was like cauterizing a wound. He said so your medicine wouldn't leak out. Hair is also something that speaks to identity. So if I have a short haircut, I could easily pass as Hispanic, Filipino, maybe Arab, Greek. But with braids, it's pretty obvious that I'm a Native man. And it's also something that many Native people wear as a way to counteract their experience with invisibility. It says, here's who I am. You can imagine then the experience for people who had either spiritual or cultural beliefs about the importance of hair or saw it as an important marker of identity, then, you know, the experience going to residential boarding school and having your braids chopped off on the first day, or schools, as there are still like public schools that require boys to have a haircut above the collar. I think when people are running into resistance about keeping their hair long or run into shaming, it's usually at the implicit level. There are cases where there's just overt teasing, or there have even been cases this year in Minnesota where somebody used hair cutting as a punishment, like a teacher did that. That has happened, but I would say those are the exceptions rather than the rule or the most common practice. If somebody cut my hair or my kid's hair, I would consider that assault. So that should definitely not be happening. But even outside of that, the system we have is not working for our Indigenous learners nearly as well as it is working for everyone else. So this is an area where we need to pay special attention. I think it's important to begin by education, providing multiple perspectives. And if you got a Native man with some braids on the workforce, that will be a very powerful statement. It makes such a difference. What we put up for art, what kind of books we pick, all that stuff makes a big difference. So I think it should all be carefully considered, because there's a lot at stake.
Stop sharing now. Okay. Any comments? Any?
What has to do the woman with their hair to be recognized because the woman, the man, if I have right understood.
Understanding? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have the braid, like
Braid.
Right. Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman
Also.
also, okay. And
But I think that it's not as much of a problem for women as it is for men in
Yeah.
America.
And
I think
sorry,
women can have long hair and nobody says anything. If they're in braids, like the two braids, a person is definitely recognizable as a native person, right? It's sort of a classic. Men having a braid in the back or two braids is something that we didn't talk about residential boarding schools, but there was I don't know how long those happened, but there was a very, very long period where Native American children were taken away from their families and put into boarding schools and forced to assimilate to become, Americans. And so the first day they would just chop off their hair. You can imagine how traumatic that would be. In fact, now there are, I think in Canada, they actually apologized to the Native American, Native people from Canada for that horrible time. But that's, we're talking about erasing identity, erasing culture. That was did very, very big damage to generations of people. And so I think even then, the fact that anything that would distinguish you as, as Native American is just stolen from you. You can imagine how important hair is even, and even I think the braid actually has, the three pieces actually have, very big significance. I think it's like the spirit, each piece of the braid has its own significance. And actually the act of doing it is like a ritual. It's very important. And so if you imagine taking away that their spirit, right? When he said, I don't want you, when he tells that story about the braid that's cut off and cauterized on a hot stone so that the medicine doesn't leak out, you can imagine that this is like such an important part of their culture that it's like a physical assault. It is actually, to have your hair cut. So
like Sansone who lost his power.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And sorry,
Hair is
a very
powerful.
stupid question. I heard, maybe it's only a rumor, but or it's right, it's correct that the Native American are yes, they are very courageous, or they don't suffer from the high, and they can clean the windows of the skyscrapers.
Really? I never heard that.
It's
It's interesting though.
maybe it's a very stupid thing, but I heard something like this, and they.
Yeah, me too. I heard that as
Really?
well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, one of the words that comes up over and over again when you study these things is resilience, right? Because if you've survived all of these centuries when the country you are native to, the people who've come in are just trying to exterminate you and trying to crush you and not giving you not even the basic human rights. I mean, basically it's even now, it's not a good situation. That's a recipe for resilience if I ever heard one. So, I can imagine that people who can survive all that can do a lot of incredible, miraculous things, right? But I never heard that.
But I have
I
a
love it.
question. I have a question. Since now we're trying to have a more inclusive language, I heard that it's better not to call Native Americans Indians. It is true, or because
Well,
in the video that you showed us, the speaker said used the
American
term.
Indian. They said American
Yeah,
Indian. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's an interesting thing. It's a good question because when I was growing up, when I was younger, they were just Indians.
Okay.
Right? Okay, but of course that was
Yeah,
an older time, right?
yeah,
I'm 52, 51 years old. So, and then at some point, as happens in a lot of minority groups, the dynamic changes and people say, okay, we want to be called this. And so
yeah,
instead of Indians, which of course they're not Indians because they're not from India,
yeah,
right? And this was,
yeah,
of course, white people
yeah,
saying, you have dark skin, and the only thing we have as a point of reference is Indian people. We'll call them Indians.
yeah,
It became Native Americans also to change the focus onto people who are native too. So like quit telling, quit telling the story from the, the white people side. We were here first. But as they said in the first video we watched, he said, you notice I said Indian because Indian is a legal term for us, and because that's how they're recognized in the Constitution. And so anything that they want to do to exercise their rights as a sovereign nation, they have to use that term. And so they say American Indian. And I've noticed it like recently it's being used a lot now. So, but you have to say American Indian. You can't just say Indian, of course. I still prefer Native American just because I don't feel like I have I feel like I need to be respectful. But it also could be, that people themselves can also decide if the dynamic is different if a person from that population is using it. But I was also surprised by it. Because I didn't think you could say that anymore. But he said, we are the only like ethnic group that's also a political entity, and it's a political root word for them. And so for them to be able to fight for their rights, it makes sense to use that term because that's how they've always been considered. So maybe it's also like retaking or taking it back, right? Kind of like words like queer, queer was used as a derogatory term um, until gay people decided, no, we're going to use it. It's going to become our word. So queer became good, right? So I think it's an interesting idea, right? It's very interesting. Yeah. So
here in my lexicology dictionary, it says that Native Americans, American Indians, First Nations, Amerindian, Aboriginal peoples, and Indigenous American are all the same, but Native American is more common, especially post 80s, and
interesting.
pre 80s was more common, say American Indians.
That's true. That's my experience. I think First Nation you hear a lot now, but you hear it more, I think, for Canadian over on the Canadian side of the border. I've heard it more than on the American side. So that's an interesting thing too, because obviously the borders are kind of where fake borders put later, but for Indigenous peoples, they were all over the place. But so you hear First Nation also, definitely. But I don't know. I hope you like talking about this stuff. I have to say I learned tons. And I definitely want to read more about it. Oh, the guy I want to also just show you the other person I was talking about. Which is here's a story about him. If you can see my screen, the sous chef. Love the spelling. So it's a play on words because a sous chef, right, uses only native ingredients, but it isn't cooking like it's 1491. I love it. It's like the reference to the Prince song. It's a long listen, 37 minutes, but this is him. He studied as a traditional chef, a French chef actually, and then decided to go back and take native ingredients back so that he could go to reservations and help some of the health problems because there's a problem with, like the standard American diet is not a healthy one, but on reservations where there could be places where just like it's hard to vote, there may not be stores close by with fresh food. So he's also talking about educating people about their heritage, about even how people used to eat before the white people came. So in his cooking, there's no sugar, there's no white flour, there's no anything that was brought or no dairy products, and there's no beef or chicken. It's only like bison meat and like things that were grown in the territories. That so it's very fascinating. And he won the James Beard Award, I think last year, for his for American cooking. That's like the highest honor you can get for cuisine, for cooking. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to look at. Anyway, last word, and then we will cut things out. Any your final thoughts, Suzanne?
Well, that I love this lesson every year. We have a lesson about Native Americans, but there's always something new I learn from these lessons. Yeah, especially the fact that they had actually a democracy before the US Constitution. That was extremely interesting for me. And this reminded me of a movie that I watched last year, The Killers of the Flower Moon, with Leonardo DiCaprio. And it was about, and it is about Native Americans and how they were killed in order to get their land and money and stuff. And it's really a long movie, but it's an interesting one. So if anyone is
Thank you,
interested.
Suzanne. Good. And thanks for joining us. Silvio,
Thank
final
you.
thought for today.
Yeah, I don't have anything special to say, so.
Okay. You can say something that you're thankful for because it's Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Do you have any
yeah.
gratitude today?
Okay. Yeah, today it's Turkey Day. Yes.
It's Turkey Day.
Yeah,
Good.
unfortunately, a friend of mine that is American, she asked me, "Do you celebrate the Thanksgiving Day?" I told her, "No, in Italy it's not on holiday."
Not a holiday,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
but
Uh,
perhaps in the future.
perhaps in the future.
Yeah.
Bruna, final thought for today.
Uh-huh. I was thinking the current situation in Palestine, where people are I don't know,
Are forcibly moved, right? People that have to leave. Yep.
yes, this was a connection that I made at once. And yes, it's very, very sad that population force are marginalized, are very mistreated, and we can hardly understand how many um, how many how much injustice in our life people have to suffer from, or to yeah, it's crazy nonsense, insane.
Yeah, it's true. And if you think about all the native, like the spider web, if we thought of ourselves as a spider web where everybody's connected, you wouldn't have any reason. And also, if we didn't have these big egos, maybe we could see that we're all humans first and maybe find a way to work together. But history repeats itself, right?
Yeah.
But it's Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for you all.
Thank you too.
Nice to see you.
You too.
See you.
See you
Bye.
next week.
Soon.
Wednesday next week, Suzanne. You weren't there Wednesday at 6,
Okay.
not Thursday next
No,
week, okay? It's our
Thursday.
last one.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Goodbye, Caroline. Goodbye, Susan.
Bye, bye,
Goodbye,
bye, bye.
Silvio. Bye.
Bye.
See you
Bye, bye,
later.
bye.
Catch you later.